بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. In the previous lessons we looked at the sentence or the two sentences وَنُحِبُّ أَحْلَ الْعَدْلِ وَالْأَمَانَةِ وَنُبْغِضُ أَحْلَ الْجَوْرِ وَالْخِيَانَةِ. That we love the people of justice and trustworthy, al-amana, fulfilling the trust, and we hate the people of tyranny and oppression and treachery. And so we looked at the meaning of each of these terms: al-adl, al-amana, al-jawr, al-khiyana, and this follows on naturally from the love and the hate, al-hub wal-bughd, which is a part of Iman. It follows on from this aspect of Iman, that we love and hate for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So after those statements, Imam al-Tahawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وَنَقُولُ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمْ فِيمَا اشْتَبَهَ عَلَيْنَا عِلْمُهُ. اللَّهُ أَعْلَمْ وَنَقُولُ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمْ فِيمَا اشْتَبَهَ عَلَيْنَا عِلْمُهُ. Which means that we say Allah knows best. Allahu A'lam. We say Allah knows best in whatever becomes confusing to us. In other words, in whatever issue of knowledge that we become confused in or unsure about. It becomes difficult for us to grasp or understand. So this sentence, we're going to stay inshallah ta'ala with this sentence for the rest of this lesson. And Sheikh Zayd al-Madkhali rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, he has a very brief comment, and he says that it is from the creed, it is from the Aqeedah of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, is that they do not speak about any of the rulings of the legislation except what they have knowledge of from the Quran or from the Sunnah or from them both. Well, this is part of our Aqeedah, that we do not speak about the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about any of the rulings of the Sharia, except that it is upon knowledge of the Kitab and the Sunnah. And anything that we do not have any knowledge of, or which becomes confusing to us, then we consign the knowledge of that to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And for that reason, this is why Imam Tahawi said, وَنَقُولُ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمْ فِيمَا اشْتَبَهَ عَلَيْنَا عِلْمُهُ. That with respect to anything whose knowledge becomes confusing or uncertain to us, then we say Allah knows best. The Shaykh says anything whose ruling is hidden from you, is hidden from a person, then he says Allahu A'lam. Allahu A'lam. And then he asks the people of knowledge. So if he doesn't know, he goes and asks the people of knowledge, or he looks into the books of ilm, the books of knowledge, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides whomever he wills to the straight path. This is the speech of Sheikh Zayd al-Madkhali. And Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan, hafidhahullah ta'ala, he says about this statement that this is a great issue, a great and mighty issue. It is the issue of knowledge. When a person, a person does not say or speak about that which he does not know. If he knows something, if he has knowledge of something, he can speak with it. But if he is ignorant, then he should not speak. He should not speak in the affairs of the religion, in the affairs of worship, that which he does not know. He shouldn't delve into these issues without knowledge. Rather, he should withhold, and he should say, Allah knows best. This is actually part of our Aqeedah, as we said. And the Shaykh says here that this is how a Muslim behaves. This is how a believer behaves. He stops and halts at his knowledge. Then he says, as for Imam Malik, he is the Imam of Darul Hijrah, the place to which Hijrah was made, which is the city of Medina. He said that a man came to him and he asked him about 40 issues. 40 issues. A man was sent by his people to travel to Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, and ask him about 40 issues that those people were in need of guidance for. So, Imam Malik only answered 4 of them. He was only able to answer 4 of those questions, of those 40 questions. And as for all of the rest, he said, La adri. La adri, which means, I do not know. So the man who came, he said to him, that I came to you all the way from such and such a place. On my riding camel, I came to you from all, from this place, on my riding beast. And you say, I do not know. You say, La adri. So Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, said, depart, go back to your people on your riding beast, return to the city that you came from, and tell your people that I asked Malik, and he said, La adri, I do not know. This shows the great wara', the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with this great Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, and he did not venture into issues, and this is alongside him being an Imam in the religion. Being an Imam in the religion. He said, for 9/10 of what he was asked about, 9/10. 1/10 he answered. 9/10 he said, I do not know. 36 of the 40 issues he said, I do not know. And likewise, the Prophet ﷺ, whenever he was asked about anything and revelation had not yet been revealed, he would wait. He wouldn't answer, he would wait. And he would wait until the revelation came through Jibreel, or it was revealed upon him. This is what we see from the practice of the Prophet ﷺ. And likewise we see from the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, when the Messenger of Allah ﷺ would ask them about something and they didn't have knowledge of that thing, they would say, Allahu wa rasuluhu a'lam. They would not start delving and guessing and so on and so forth. And this is a great and very dangerous subject area. This is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made speech without knowledge, to speak without knowledge, to be something more serious than shirk itself. To be of a level, of a rank which is above shirk. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said in Surah Al-A'raf, Surah 7 verse number 33, قُلْ إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ رَبِّيَ الْفَوَاحِشِ مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا وَمَا بَطَنَ وَالْإِثْمَ وَالْبَغِي بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ وَأَن تُشْرِكُوا بِاللَّهِ مَا لَمْ يُنَزِّلْ بِهِ سُلْطَانًا وَأَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. In this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He commands His messenger to say, my Lord has forbidden. Then He mentions 4 things which have been forbidden. 4 things. And so He begins first of all with the fawahish, meaning those shameful, evil types of deeds. The fawahish meaning those which involve the lust and the desire. My Lord has forbidden al-fawahish, those which are done openly, and those which are done in secret. This is the first thing which is prohibited. Then He said, وَالْإِثْمُ وَالْبَغِي بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ. And then to transgress, meaning to commit oppression without justice and truth. This was the third thing that increases in severity on top of the first thing. Then he said, وَأَن تُشْرِكُوا بِاللَّهِ مَا لَمْ يُنَزِّلْ بِهِ سُلْطَانًا, and that you associate partners with Allah in that in which He has given you no authority. Meaning that He's given you no authority to ascribe partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the third thing. And then he mentioned and delayed the fourth thing right to the very end, which was وَأَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, that you say about Allah that of which you have no knowledge. And the scholars explain, as we shall see a little later inshallah ta'ala, that the reason why this has been delayed to the very end, it is the fourth of all of these things, these four things, is because speaking without knowledge is the foundation of every evil. It is the foundation of shirk itself. Shirk has only ever arisen because people began to speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without knowledge. So it is the foundation of shirk itself, which is why it has been delayed to the very end, to show that it is the foundation of all of this of evil. And likewise in Surah Al-Isra, the 17th surah, verse number 36, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. Do not pursue that of which you have no knowledge, because indeed the hearing and the seeing and the senses, meaning the feeling, the heart, all of these will be inquired into. So the Shaykh continues and he says, Ya akhi, your brother, it is enough for you simply to say, La adri. It is enough for you to say, I do not know. La adri. And whoever says, La adri, then he has indeed given the answer. He's responded. Don't start delving, guessing, and going into the rulings of the Sharia without any insight, without any knowledge. Rather say, La adri. La adri. And when a person says, I do not know, this is not any deficiency in him. This does not signify any deficiency. Rather, it is a sign of perfection. Why? Because this itself is from the wara', from what we call the awe and fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the observance, being observant with respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is from taqwa, it is from the fear and piety of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you were to show this wara' and this piety, then the people will praise you, the Shaykh says. When you do not know and you say, I do not know, then this is a sign of your piety and your wara'. And the people will praise you, they will not consider you to be ignorant. Rather, this is something praiseworthy. And then the Shaykh says that many of those who ascribe to knowledge, and especially in these later times, in our times, when the fuqaha, when the jurists have diminished, they are small in number, and the qurra, meaning those who are the reciters and the readers, they have increased in number. Meaning those who actually understand the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have diminished. And those who simply read, recite, they have increased number. These types of people, they give fatwa, they give verdicts in serious issues, they make judgments, and they make all sorts of mistakes. They stumble and make mistakes with respect to the rulings of the Sharia. And you find them, the Shaykh says, you find them on the various media outlets. These people, they are on there being interviewed and, assuming the role of a scholar and giving verdicts and so on and so forth. Because the means of communication have become many and easy, every person can come along and pose as a scholar. And that's what we find in many of these satellite channels and so on and so forth, where we have the juhal, the ignoramuses, who are addressing the people and giving them verdicts. So, however, the Shaykh says, it is by the grace and bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, many of these people have actually been exposed for their ignorance. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has exposed them because they did not adhere to the fear of Allah, the awe of Allah, and they spoke upon jahl, upon ignorance. So they were exposed because they did not protect themselves and conceal themselves and hold back from those things in which they did not have knowledge. Rather, they delved into these issues which brought their downfall. So if they had done that, if they had the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it would have been more perfect, more lofty for them in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and likewise in the sight of the people. So this is the speech of Shaykh Salih Al-Fawzan, Hafidhahullah ta'ala, and now we'll move to the commentary of Shaykh Salih Al-Shaykh, and the Shaykh says, وَنَقُولُ, the saying about Tahaawiyyah, وَنَقُولُ اللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ فِيمَا اشْتَبَهَ عَلَيْنَا عِلْمُهُ. So he says that he intends here the followers of the four Imams. That the followers of the four Imams, Imam Malik, Abu Hanifa, Imam al-Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad, rahimahumullah ta'ala, that it is from their way, and likewise the way of the people of Hadith, the Ahlul Hadith wal Athar, the people of Athar, that all of them, they abide by the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in that they do not speak without knowledge. They do not speak without ilm. And this is because they fulfill the commandment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we mentioned, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. Do not pursue that of which you have no knowledge. For indeed the hearing, seeing, and the feeling, meaning the heart, all of that will be inquired into. Surah 17, verse number 36. And the same ayah in Surah Al-A'raf, as we mentioned earlier, وَأَن تُشْرِكُوا بِاللَّهِ مَا لَمْ يُنَزِّلْ بِهِ سُلْطَانًا وَأَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. That you associate partners with Allah, that for which He gave you no authority, and that you say about Allah that of which you have no knowledge. So here the Shaykh says that speaking about Allah without knowledge is haram, it is unlawful, and it is associated with kufr and shirk. It has been put alongside kufr and shirk, because shirk and kufr never occurred, and likewise the worship of other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never occurred, except by speaking about Allah without knowledge. The Shaykh mentions the ayah in the Quran, سَيَقُولُ الَّذِينَ أَشْرَكُوا لَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ مَا أَشْرَكْنَا وَلَا آبَاؤُنَا وَلَا حَرَّمْنَا مِنْ شَيْءٍ. That the pagans will soon say, if Allah had so willed, we would not have committed shirk, nor would our forefathers have committed shirk, nor would we have declared anything to be haram. So look at here how they say that we would not have committed shirk, nor would we have declared anything to be haram. But what led them to fall into shirk, and what led them to make something haram which Allah had made halal? It was speaking without ilm. Speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without ilm. So therefore the Shaykh says, every misguidance which has occurred, then it is because of speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without knowledge. And as for Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah and the followers of the Hadith and Athar, then we see that they are able to withhold their desires, and they're able to control over their souls, to gain control over their souls, and they're able to fulfill the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the command of His Messenger. And so they say, Allah knows best with respect to whatever they have no knowledge of. This is the way of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, the people of Hadith, the people of Athar. They control their desires, they dominate their souls, and if they don't know something, they say, Allahu A'lam. This is why we see in the Hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, the Hadith of Jibreel, when he came alayhi salam, and he came to ask the Prophet alayhi salatu salam, in the well-known Hadith of Islam and Iman and Ihsan, he said, right at the very end of that Hadith, there occurs that Umar radiallahu anhu, when he said, Ya Umar, Atadri man is-sa'il? Atadri man is-sa'il? He said to Umar, do you know who is the one who came to ask the question? He said, Allahu wa rasuluhu a'lam. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, هذا جبريل جاءكم يعلمكم أمر دينكم. He said, this is Jibreel, he came to you in order to teach you the affair of your religion. So we see that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, this is just one example of numerous examples of how when the Sahaba would, when asked a question by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu, he would say, do you know what is the right of Allah upon His servants and what is the right of the servants upon Allah? And so we'll say Allah and His Messenger know best. This is many examples of this are found in the Sunnah. So the Sahaba, they implemented this principle during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and likewise the scholars implemented this principle after that time right up until this day of ours. Now here there are a number of issues with respect to this phrase, Allahu A'lam, when we say Allah knows best. What does this mean? If we look at this word, A'lam, A'lamu, this itself is what we call Ismu Tafdil. It is Af'alu Tafdil. It is the verb of something being better than something else. It is a verb which is comparative. Something is comparative to something else and greater than it. So here, A'lam, it would mean more knowledgeable. More knowledgeable. But this is not the actual intent here. So you have to understand what is meant. Even though linguistically, A'lam means that so-and-so is more knowledgeable of so-and-so. Right? This would imply that both have knowledge. Right? This is because it is a comparative verb. But what is intended here is, when a person says, it can either refer to, when you say Allahu A'lam, you could either be speaking about yourself. So it means Allah knows best. And you're referring to your own ignorance. Or it can mean Allahu A'lam, and you mean everybody else. You mean the whole of the creation. The whole of the creation. So here this means only Allah knows and nobody else knows. Or you may be saying Allahu A'lam, meaning Allahu A'lam minni, meaning Allah knows and I do not know in this issue. Right? The two ways in which it can be intended. Now, when a person says Allahu A'lam in an issue of the religion, then it is not intended in the second sense. Right? So in other words, what you're really saying is Allah knows best, I do not know. But it does not mean Allah knows best and nobody else knows. Why? Because as we shall see in a short while, there is no affair of the religion except that someone in the ummah knows its ruling and has knowledge of it. So what you are really saying is Allahu A'lam minni. Allah knows and I do not know, because the issue is confusing to me, I don't have knowledge of this issue. Allah knows best. But it doesn't imply at the same time that there is no one at all whatsoever that does not know the ruling in that issue or have knowledge in that issue. Of course, we're not speaking here about issues to do with the unseen and things which only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually knows. How is Allah's essence? Only Allah knows. How are Allah's names and attributes? Only Allah knows. How is the reality of the sirat and the mizan and Jannah and nar? Of course, these things only Allah knows. We know this. But we are speaking here of matters of knowledge and rulings and so on and so forth, in which the Sharia has actually come with. So, we say Allah knows best. Now, as for saying Allahu wa rasuluhu a'lam, Allah and His Messenger know best, then this was only said during the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahu wa rasuluhu a'lam. This was only said during the life of the Prophet alayhi salatu. As for after the Prophet alayhi salatu, then we simply say Allahu a'lam, Why? Because the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, he passed away, and the era of revelation ceased, meaning the time in which he was receiving revelation had ceased, and that was the time in which Jibreel would come to him and bring knowledge to him. So that era has finished. So therefore now we only say Allahu A'lam. Allah knows best. So that was the first issue. The first mas'ala here is regarding Allahu A'lam. When we say Allah knows best. The second issue is that Imam al-Tahawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, فِيمَا اشْتَبَهَ عَلَيْنَا عِلْمُهُ فِيمَا اشْتَبَهَ عَلَيْنَا عِلْمُهُ. He said, we say Allah knows best in those issues in which there is that we are uncertain, we are confused, we do not know the knowledge therein. Now, there's an issue here then, which is that this ishtibah, this confusion or lack of clarity that is being referred to here, this is alluded to in the Quran, in Surah Ali Imran, Surah 3, verse number 7. مِنْهُ آيَاتٌ مُحْكَمَاتٌ حُنَّ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ وَأُخَرُ مُتَشَابِهَاتٌ. That in this book there are verses which are decisive, and they are the mother of the book, the main part of the book. And there are others which are mutashabihat. There are others which are ambiguous. And here when At-Tahawi says, فِيمَا اشْتَبَهَ عَلَيْنَا عِلْمُهُ, he's speaking about, he does not mean to say that there are things which no one has knowledge of. In other words, that there are things in the Quran and the Sunnah that there is no one on the face of this earth, or who has ever traversed this earth from the time of the Prophet ﷺ to this day of ours, which is not known to the Ummah. Rather, he's speaking of it in a relative sense. What does this mean? It means that something might be ambiguous to you, but not to an alim, not to a scholar. You might not have knowledge of that issue. You might know the evidence, for example, but you do not know how the evidence is understood. So therefore this is confusing to you, but it is not confusing to the alim, to the scholar. So when we speak of things being uncertain and ambiguous, we are only speaking in the sense of individuals, in relation to individuals. We're not speaking in the sense that there are affairs in the religion which absolutely nobody has any knowledge of. The Shaykh says that everything in the Kitab and the Sunnah of the commands and the prohibitions, and of knowledge and of action, there is nothing in those affairs, meaning ilm, amal, and likewise al-amru wa nahi, knowledge, action, command, prohibition, these four things, there is nothing in the Sharia which is ambiguous to the whole of the Ummah. Rather, some affairs may be ambiguous to some people, but not to other people. This is a relative affair. It all comes down to the level of knowledge of a servant. And, sometimes even amongst the scholars, there could be an alim to whom something has become ambiguous. But to another alim who is greater than him in knowledge, it is not ambiguous to that alim. So even amongst the ulama, there are levels. And some affairs might become ambiguous to some, but not to others. And so for that reason, we say that, there may be an ayah revealed, there may be a verse that revealed, and a sahabi might not know the meaning of that ayah. So for example, Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he would ask about certain verses. He would go to the Messenger of Allah and say, what does this verse mean? He wouldn't know. And Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, likewise, he would come. And he would likewise ask, and sometimes when he would be asked, he would say, which sky is going to give me shade, and which earth is going to hold me when I speak about the book of Allah, that of which I have no knowledge. And Umar bin al-Khattab would actually have some similar statements, and he himself would ask about the meanings of certain verses in the Quran. And likewise amongst the Sahaba themselves, they would take issues between themselves and return issues to others amongst them. So all of this is a great foundation in that a person, he says, Allahu A'lam. Allah knows best. And as we said, this ambiguity or confusion is something that, for example, a person might know the evidence, he might know the actual evidence, the verse or the hadith, but he does not know how, he does not know how are we deriving the evidence from this text. So he knows this is a text, he knows it's in front of him, but he does not know the tafsir of that text. He does not know how to derive the evidence from that text. So in this regard, it is not for him to start delving and speaking out of ignorance and without knowledge. Rather, he says, this is the evidence, this is the ayah, this is the hadith, I know this hadith, I know that this is being used as a proof, but I can't see how it's being used as a proof. I don't know the istidlal, how is the evidence being derived. The Shaykh mentions again the incident of Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, how he was asked about 40 issues, and he answered 4 of them, and about the rest of them he said, Allahu A'lam, la adri. Allah knows best, I do not know. And this is because of his great veneration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in that they should say about his religion that of which they have no knowledge. So the Shaykh says this is a great qa'idah, a great principle here, and it is something that a person needs, especially when he is discussing issues with other people in matters of knowledge. Because sometimes a person might discuss and dispute issues, and shaitan comes to him and says, you know all of the issues, you know everything, you understand everything. And then he abandons saying Allahu A'lam. So in the course of discussion, he is, because he's not careful and cautious, then he's led to start speaking in every issue that arises in the course of discussion, giving his opinion, giving his viewpoint, thinking that he knows everything. And therefore he drops his guard, and he doesn't say Allahu A'lam, La Adri, he doesn't say that. So as for Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, then they have humility and knowledge, they have at-tawadu', they have humility and knowledge, because they are humble to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in knowledge and action. And that's why Ibn al-Mubarak, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said even in terms of knowledge can also have a transgression. Just like a person transgresses in terms of mal, in terms of wealth, he has physical wealth, he has money, wealth, possessions, and he can transgress in the way that he uses that wealth or how he deals with that wealth. Then likewise with ilm, knowledge likewise has transgression. A person can transgress in terms of knowledge in the way that he uses or that he abuses that knowledge. And this includes speaking without ilm, speaking without knowledge. So wealth has transgression. There is transgression in relation to wealth, and likewise ilm, knowledge, has transgression as well. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in Surah Al-Alaq, Kalla innal insana la yatagha. Indeed, man, he transgresses beyond the bounds. Ar-ra'ahu staghna. That he considers himself to be self-sufficient. Inna ila rabbika ar-ruj'a. Indeed, to your Lord will be the return. And likewise, a person might increase in knowledge, and he continues increasing in knowledge, and he begins to transgress against other people. He does not take the approach that the Sharia has asked him to approach of being just in his speech, and likewise towards the people in being just towards them. And this is what is required from a person who is a qadi, for example, someone who is a judge or an alim. He has to judge with justice, with adl, not with desire. Allah commands, فَحْكُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ بِالْحَقِّ وَلَا تَتَّبِعِ الْحَوَىٰ فَيُضِلَّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Judge between the people with truth, and do not follow the desire, such that it will lead you away from the path of Allah. So, a person, when he does not behave in this topic in the right way, when he abandons saying Allahu A'lam, then every mistake will start appearing. And this is how, as we said, in the whole of history, every misguidance, every bid'ah, every kufr, every shirk the foundation of all of that is because of not observing this principle of not saying Allahu A'lam. And so corruption begins to appear in a person's statement, in his speech. However, if he was to restrain himself and adhere to this principle and say Allahu A'lam, then the light of knowledge will appear in his heart. It is from the light of knowledge to say Allahu A'lam. And then when he says he does not know, when a person says I do not know and knows that he is ignorant, he acknowledges he is ignorant, that will lead him to remove ignorance from himself. And therefore he will acquire further light. See the difference? When a person speaks upon jahl, he does not acknowledge that he has jahl. He will not correct himself and seek knowledge in that issue. But when a person says Allahu A'lam, he will return to the scholars, he will return to the books, he will find, he will ask, he will want to remove jahl from himself. And by removing that jahl from himself, he has increased in knowledge. He's increased in the light of knowledge. And Allah has given him firmness. Whereas the other person, that person is upon a shaky ground. This person showed humility to Allah. And when he showed humility to Allah, Allah gave him knowledge, He taught him, and He raised him in rank. So this is the end of the speech on this principle, this great and mighty principle, which is the principle of saying Allah knows best and not speaking without knowledge. And with that, we conclude our lesson here today, and we will continue in the next lesson, inshallah ta'ala, with the following statements of Imam al-Tahaawi, rahimahullah ta'ala. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.